And just like that, the man who once led one of Ireland's most feared robbery crews found himself cast out.
Thank you for watching Why I Killed You TV. Please make sure to like, comment, share, and subscribe to this particular video on this particular YouTube channel. I would greatly appreciate it. We're going to be talking about a tough dude today. Patrick Fishy Fitzgerald. He's just not another name in Ireland's crime files. He was one of the most feared gang figures to ever come out of Finglas. For years, he operated in the shadows, quickly building a criminal empire while grooming the next generation of Irish gangsters. Fitzgerald made his name not by making headlines, but by staying one step ahead of the law. Known for being very smart, calculating, and deeply connected, he was considered a mentor to many young criminals in Dublin. He didn't just run jobs, he organized them. He supplied the guns, he taught others how to move without leaving a trace. Some investigators believe he helped guide over 30 armed robberies while he was keeping his own name out of the spotlight. But that changed back in 2021 when things took a violent turn. Fitzgerald was linked to a botched Gangland shooting where a young man was nearly murdered in broad daylight. It wasn't just any crime. It was part of a growing gang feud fueled by revenge, territory, and money. And this time, Fitzgerald's name was front and center. Let's roll this clip.
Fishy has seen it all. His story is one of robberies, feuds, and intimidation, culminating in the law finally catching up with him after years on the streets. Patrick Fishy Fitzgerald has been a feared name in Dublin's criminal underworld for decades. He's a longtime gangster from the tough streets of Finglas, North Dublin, a career criminal who earned his nickname and reputation through years of ruthless activity. By his late 40s, Patrick Fitzgerald was no longer just a name whispered in gangland circles. He was a grandfather with a criminal record stretching all the way back to the 1990s. For decades, he had moved through the shadows of Dublin's underworld, building a reputation as both a hardened enforcer and a seasoned survivor. From leading one of Ireland's most prolific armed robbery crews to helping orchestrate a gangland assassination attempt, 2006, police stopped him and found nearly 48,000 euros in cash stashed in the spare tire of his car. Fitzgerald boldly claimed the money was his, but investigators later proved it was criminal proceeds. Under a cab order, he was forced to hand over almost 50,000 euros. It was one of the first clear signs that Fishy Fitzgerald was involved in more than just traffic offenses. He had access to serious cash and ties to the drug trade, even if he'd avoided any major convictions up to that point. Patrick Fitzgerald's criminal record stretches back to the late 1990s. In the early days, he built up a string of minor offenses, 72 convictions in total, mostly for traffic-related incidents. But behind those petty charges was something far more serious. While the rap sheet mostly pointed to driving offenses, Garda had long suspected Fitzgerald of being involved in organized crime. He was so notorious that the Criminal Assets Bureau flagged him early on. In 2010, Fitzgerald had shifted gears. He was now running a prolific armed robbery crew out of Finglas, a gang that would go on to become one of the most active robbery outfits in Ireland's recent history. Between 2010 and 2020, his crew was linked to around 20 armed raids in under 2 years. They hit locations across Dublin, as well as Meath and Kildare. These weren't clean jobs either. In some cases, they stormed into family homes, terrorizing ordinary people just to get their hands on cash or valuables. Despite this, Fitzgerald kept a relatively low public profile, since his past convictions were still mostly minor. But Garda were watching. Within law enforcement, he was well known, and specialist units had their eye on him. The robbery spree wasn't just about fast money. Authorities believed the cash from those jobs was funneled straight into drug operations. By this point, Fitzgerald was a heavy cocaine user himself, and he wasn't hiding it. As his influence grew, so did his aggression. He began acting like a gangland enforcer in Finglas, using threats and violence to control the area. Some local families were bullied so badly they packed up and left their homes just to get away. Still, even with regular run-ins with the law, Fitzgerald often managed to wriggle free. In one 2014 case, Garda found a loaded gun hidden in the garden of an innocent neighbor. They believed it was connected to Fitzgerald. He was brought in for questioning along with an associate, a moment that could have landed him in serious trouble, but no charges were filed due to lack of evidence. Incidents like this only added to Fishy Fitzgerald's almost mythical reputation. No matter what, he always seemed one step ahead. Fitzgerald's crew would pressure residents to let them use their houses to stash drugs or weapons, basically taking over through fear. Neighbors lived in constant dread of crossing him. Irish police clamped down wherever they could. In 2012, Garda raided an empty house in Finglas and found a makeshift cannabis grow house linked to Fitzgerald's crew. Inside, they seized over 100 cannabis plants worth roughly €40,000, along with a handgun and a shotgun. It was a clear sign the gang was now combining drugs and firearms in their operations. But around 2014, the cracks started to show. That year, serious charges against Fitzgerald were suddenly dropped, a move that raised eyebrows, especially among his own crew. Whispers started. Had he cut a deal? Was he working with the cops? The paranoia spread fast. Things soon turned violent. Fitzgerald was beaten up by his own gang members. And just like that, the man who once led one of Ireland's most feared robbery crews found himself cast out. Insiders later claimed that despite the fortune they'd made, Fitzgerald was broke by the end of it. He'd been shut out of the profits and left with nothing. He even claimed he gave up cocaine around that time, maybe shaken by the betrayal and how far he'd fallen. But anyone who thought that was the end of Fishy Fitzgerald's criminal life had another thing coming. Even after the robbery gang he was associated with fell apart, Patrick Fitzgerald never truly stepped away from the criminal world. He stayed closely connected to the who's who of Dublin gangland figures. Over the years, he associated with some of the capital's most notorious names, including former allies of the slain crime boss Eamon the Don Dunn, like Alan Fatpuss Bradley and Christopher Git Waldron. In more recent years, Fitzgerald became entangled in the brutal gang feuds that have plagued Finglas. One major feud saw Glenn Ward, most commonly known as Mr. Flashy, a young gang boss whose gang is known to love designer clothes and have alleged alliance to the UK Cartel, go to war with a rival crew led by James Whelen. Former friends who had become bitter enemies. Ward's gang, dubbed the Gucci Gang by the media for their love of designer clothes, brought chaos to the streets of Finglas as tensions with Whelan's side escalated. Fitzgerald threw his support behind Whelan's crew. By then, he was in his 40s, more of a veteran figure, someone seen as an elder statesman of gangland, mentoring younger criminals. He even took a young associate of Whelan's under his wing, a teenage up-and-comer who'd soon find himself at the center of one of the most shocking gangland incidents Dublin had ever seen. On the 3rd of April 2022, James Whelen was shot dead. His murder occurred in the Deanstown Avenue area of Finglas, the first gangland murder of the year. His killing only added fuel to an already raging fire. Mr. Flashy managed to survive the feud and was later jailed on unrelated firearms charges, but the violence didn't stop. New enemies were made and the cycle of retaliation rolled on. Gary Kerry was a known drug dealer based in West Dublin. By late 2021, he'd made powerful enemies. Garda said he'd fallen foul of a major organized crime group in Ballyfermot and was under serious threat. That threat became very real. On the night of the 17th of November, 2021, Kerry was visiting a house on Ballyfermot Crescent in Dublin 10. At around 7:30 p.m., he stepped out to his car, unaware that a hit team was waiting nearby. Just as he started his Volkswagen, a stolen black Opel Zafira screeched to a halt in front of him, blocking his way. Within seconds, two gunmen opened fire through the windscreen, unleashing 10 rounds at close range. Kerry was hit twice in the stomach, bleeding and panicked. He somehow managed to escape. He ran back into the house, through to the back, and jumped over a garden wall while the gunman kept firing. Against all odds, he survived. Neighbors found him collapsed and called for help. He was rushed to hospital in critical condition. Surgeons removed one bullet, but another was too close to vital organs to be safely taken out. It was nothing short of a miracle that Kerry lived. Fearing for his life, he left Ireland soon after recovering, moving his family to Spain in a desperate attempt to stay off the radar. Patrick Fishy Fitzgerald's role in the attempted murder of Gary Kerry was behind the scenes, but absolutely vital. He supplied the getaway cars that made the ambush possible. In the days leading up to the shooting, Fitzgerald bought a black Opel Zafira for around €750 and a second vehicle, a Toyota Avensis, for about €800. He fueled up the Zafira, scoped out the area in advance, and handed the car over to the hit team on the day of the attack. After the shooting, while Kerry lay bleeding, Fitzgerald helped the gunmen escape and covered their tracks. The Zafira was found burned out not far from the scene, with 2 handguns left inside. The Avensis, used as a secondary getaway car, was also torched and abandoned that same night. Investigators assigned to the case described how difficult it was to piece it all together. They pulled CCTV footage from across the city and cross-referenced it with phone records. It all paid off. In court, it was revealed that Fitzgerald's phone data and CCTV footage placed him at the center of the plot. He was caught on camera driving the cars around Finglas in the week before the attack. It became clear Fitzgerald was the logistical backbone of the hit team, not the shooter, but the man who made the operation possible. As for Gary, the Canary, Kerry, surviving the Ballyfermot ambush didn't buy him much time. Just 7 months later, after briefly relocating to Spain, Kerry returned to Dublin. In June 2022, he was shot multiple times in a separate separate incident in the South inner city. This time, he didn't make it. Kerry died from his injuries on the 5th of August 2022. Fitzgerald wasn't involved in that fatal attack, but by then, Garda had built a strong case linking him to the first failed attempt on Kerry's life. He was arrested and charged initially with attempted murder. It was a heavy charge, carrying the potential for a very long prison term. As the court case progressed, it became clear that Fitzgerald hadn't pulled the trigger himself, but had facilitated the attempted hit. Facing overwhelming evidence, in May 2025, he pleaded guilty to a lesser charge, facilitating a criminal organization in carrying out the attempted murder. It was a strategic move. He admitted to helping the gang without taking full responsibility for the attempted killing. By 2025, Fitzgerald's young protégé, the same lad he'd mentored, was targeted in an assassination attempt straight out of a film. A drone carrying a live pipe bomb was flown over Finglas, aimed at killing the young gangster as part of the ongoing feud. The plot failed, the bomb didn't hit its mark, but the message was clear. These criminals were willing to use drones to take each other out, and behind it all stood Fishy Fitzgerald, still involved, still pulling strings, and still connected to the young men fueling this high-tech gangland war. Patrick Fishy Fitzgerald and Gary the Canary Kerry, two names now etched into Dublin's gangland history. It was the attempted assassination of Kerry in 2021 that would mark the beginning of the end for Fitzgerald's freedom. Still, it meant serious prison time was inevitable. Even while out on bail awaiting trial for the initial Kerry case, Fitzgerald couldn't stay out of trouble. In August 2023, he took part in a violent home invasion organized by another criminal associate, proof that his intimidation tactics were far from behind him. In this incident, Fitzgerald and several others stormed a home in South Dublin during the early hours. Inside were an elderly couple in their 70s, their adult daughter and a 6-year-old child. The gang tied up the family and ransacked the house, subjecting them to a terrifying ordeal. According to Irish media, the victims were relatives of a former bank employee, and the gang may have believed there was money hidden in the home. This also showed that Fitzgerald was willing to target innocent people, including an elderly man, woman, and a young child, while already on bail, showed just how little regard he had for the law or anyone's safety. For him, intimidation was second nature. No one was off limits. When this case reached court, even Fitzgerald's own lawyers pleaded for leniency. They argued that his growing list of sentences should be considered together, so that his total prison time wouldn't become intolerable, but there was little sympathy. In February 2025, the Central Criminal Court sentenced him to 7.5 years in prison for the home invasion. That sentence came on top of whatever time he'd face for his part in the Kerry plot. Now, in 2025, Patrick Fitzgerald sits behind bars, and more time is likely to be added soon. With his guilty plea for facilitating attempted murder, he's awaiting sentencing set for mid-2025.
You're gonna die. I don't want to do this.